On the day of my wife's funeral, her wealthy boss called me and whispered 3 words that made my blood run cold. "You are in danger." He told me to come to his office immediately and to hide it from my son. When I arrived, he played a security tape that shattered my entire world. I watched the screen in horror, realizing that the people I had raised, the people I had loved and protected, were not my family. They were monsters. And the woman I had slept next to for 40 years had a secret so big it could either save me or get me killed. But before I tell you what I saw on that tape, I need you to understand how it all began, standing in the rain, surrounded by the people who wanted me dead. My name is Harrison Blackwood. I am 72 years old, and up until last week, I thought I was just a grieving widower. If you have ever felt betrayed by the very people who were supposed to love you, please hit the like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments which city you are watching from. Your support helps me tell this story. It was raining at Oakwood Cemetery, a cold, relentless drizzle that soaked through my black wool coat and settled deep into my bones. I stood as close as I could to the mahogany casket, my hand resting on the wet wood. Inside lay Catherine. My Katie. 40 years of marriage, 40 years of coffee in the morning, and news in the evening, all sealed away in a box. I felt like half of my body had been amputated. I wanted silence. I wanted a moment to tell her goodbye, to tell her I didn't know how to navigate this world without her compass. But there was no silence. Just to my right, my son Derek was shifting his weight impatiently in his Italian leather shoes. He wasn't looking at his mother's grave. He was looking at his phone, shielding it from the rain, with a program whispering aggressively. I tried to tune him out, assuming he was dealing with family members, or perhaps comforting a relative. But my hearing has always been sharp. It was a skill I honed during my 30 years as an insurance fraud investigator. You learn to listen to what people say when they think no one is listening. "No, listen to me," Derek hissed into the phone, his voice tight with irritation. "I don't care what the Blue Book value is. The Porsche is a limited edition. Tell the buyer if he doesn't wire the 80,000 by noon, I'm walking." I closed my eyes. My wife was being lowered into the ground, and my 35-year-old son was closing a car deal. A wave of nausea hit me, but I swallowed it down. I told myself everyone grieves differently. Maybe this was his way of coping. Maybe he needed a distraction from the pain. I was still making excuses for him, still playing the role of the understanding father. I didn't know then that he wasn't distracting himself from pain. He was just doing business. I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, expecting a hug or a comforting hand. It was Monica, my daughter-in-law. She looked impeccable in a designer black dress that fit her a little too perfectly, her makeup flawless despite the humidity. She didn't have a tissue in her hand. She had a piece of paper, a folded invoice. She pressed it into my palm, her fingernails digging slightly into my skin. "Harrison, we need to talk about this," she said. Her voice was low, but it lacked any warmth. It was the tone she used when she was scolding the maid. I looked down at the paper. It was the bill for the funeral services, the casket, the plot, the flowers. $15,000. I had selected the mahogany casket myself because Katie loved the color. She deserved the best. I had already written the check from my personal savings account, the money I had put aside for a rainy day. "What is this, Monica?" I asked, my voice raspy from days of not speaking enough. "It is ridiculous." "Is what it is," she snapped, glancing around to make sure the priest wasn't listening. $15,000 for a box that is going underground. I told you, Harrison. I told you specifically that cremation was the sensible option. It would have cost $2,000. You just threw $13,000 into the dirt. I stared at her, unable to comprehend the cruelty. We were standing over the open grave. "It is what she wanted, Monica," I said quietly. "Katie wanted to be buried near her parents, and I paid for it. This isn't your money. Monica let out a sharp, derisive sigh. She crossed her arms, protecting her silk dress from the wind. That is the problem, Harrison. It is all family money now, isn't it? Derek and I looked at the company accounts this morning. Cash flow is tight. We have suppliers to pay next week. You draining your retirement savings for sentimental garbage puts pressure on all of us. You know Derek is stressed. You know he is trying to keep the business afloat. My heart hammered against my ribs. The business. The real estate firm I had helped Derek start with my severance package 10 years ago. I had stepped back, letting him take the reins, thinking I was empowering him. Now, at his mother's funeral, his wife was scolding me for spending my own money on his mother's dignity. I paid for it. I repeated, my voice hardening slightly. It is done. Let me say goodbye to my wife in peace. Monica rolled her eyes, a gesture so disrespectful it felt like a slap. Fine. Be stubborn. But don't expect us to cover your medical bills when you run out of cash. You are not getting any younger, Harrison. She turned on her heel and walked back to where Derek was finishing his call. I watched them. They stood together under a large black umbrella, not touching, not comforting each other. They were whispering, looking back at me. They didn't look like mourners. They looked like conspirators. The priest finished the final prayer. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I threw a single white rose onto the casket. It landed with a soft thud that echoed in the hollows of my chest. Goodbye, my love, I whispered. I will be with you soon. As the few remaining guests began to drift away toward their cars, Derek walked over to me. He pocketed his phone and adjusted his tie. He didn't look red-eyed. He looked energized, impatient. Well, that is done, he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, like a law enforcement officer arresting a suspect. I nodded, wiping rain from my glasses. I am going to stay a little longer, son. You go ahead. No, you should come with us, Derek said, and it wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Actually, don't bother going back to your place tonight. Just come straight to ours. I looked at him, confused. I want to go home, Derek. I want to sit in your mother's chair. I need to be in our house. Derek exchanged a look with Monica, who had walked up beside him. She gave him a small nod. Dad, about the house, Derek said, his tone shifting to that fake, condescending softness people use when talking to a child or someone they think is senile. We need to be practical. That Victorian is huge. It is old. The maintenance alone costs a fortune, and the heating bills are astronomical. Mom is gone. You are 72. You can't manage a 4-bedroom estate by yourself. I can manage just fine, I said, straightening my back. I fixed the roof last year myself. Derek sighed, looking at his watch. Look, we can argue about this later, but you need to go home and start packing your personal things. Just the essentials. Clothes, toiletries, maybe a few photos. Packing. I asked the air leaving my lungs. What are you talking about? The realtor is meeting me there at 3 o'clock, Derek said flatly. We are listing the house today. The market is hot, Dad. We can get $2 million for it if we move fast. I already told them it is vacant. Vacant, I repeated. The word tasted like ash. I live there. Not for long, Monica chimed in, checking her nails. Ideally, we want it staged and ready for open house by the weekend. You will stay in our guest room for a few weeks until we find you a nice assisted living facility. There is a budget one near the highway that is very affordable. My knees nearly gave out. I looked from my son to his wife. They weren't suggesting this. They had planned it. They had called the realtor before my wife's body was even cold. They weren't waiting for me to die to inherit my life. They were burying me alongside Catherine. I am not selling my home, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and grief. Derek stepped closer, invading my personal space. His eyes were cold, devoid of any empathy. Don't be difficult, Dad. You don't have a choice. You signed the power of attorney last year when you had that minor stroke. Remember, I control the assets now. I am doing this for your own good. You are incompetent to manage an estate of that size. I stood there, the rain soaking my white hair, realizing with horror that the document I had signed, thinking it was just for medical emergencies, was now their weapon. They were evicting me. "Go pack, Dad," Derek said, turning away. "And don't make a scene when the photographer comes. It would be embarrassing." He walked away toward his luxury SUV, Monica trailing behind him. They didn't look back. I stood alone by the open grave, the sound of the rain filling the silence. I felt small. I felt powerless. I felt like my life was over. But then inside the pocket of my wet coat, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out with trembling hands. It wasn't a number I recognized. But when I answered, the voice on the other end cut through the noise of the rain like a knife. "Harrison, this is Preston Gould." Preston, Catherine's boss. The CEO of Gould Logistics. A man worth billions. I hadn't spoken to him in years. "Preston," I said, confused. "Today is the funeral." I know, he said, his voice urgent, stripped of any pleasantries. "Listen to me very carefully, Harrison. Are you with your son?" I said. "They just walked to the car." "Good," Preston said. "Get in your car. Do not go home. Do not go to your son's house. Come to my office. Right now." "Preston, what is this about?" I asked. "It is about Catherine," he said. "And it is about your life. Do not tell Derek or Monica you are talking to me. If they know what I found, you won't survive the night." The line went dead. I stood there staring at the phone, my heart pounding, a rhythm of terror against my ribs. I looked toward the parking lot. Derek was backing his car out, waiting for me to follow. I realized then that the funeral was over. But the war had just begun. The interior of Derek's brand new SUV smelled of fresh leather and stale aggression. It was a sterile, hermetically sealed bubble that separated us from the rain lashing against the windows, but inside the air was thick enough to choke on. I sat in the passenger seat, my hands folded on my lap, staring straight ahead at the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers. In the rearview mirror, I could see Monica in the back seat, tapping furiously on her phone, the blue light illuminating her face in a ghostly, detached glow. She was already browsing furniture catalogs, likely picking out a replacement for the antique armoire my wife had cherished for 30 years. I felt like a prisoner being transported between facilities. Derek drove with a tense, jerky rhythm, accelerating too hard at green lights and braking too late at red ones. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw set in a tight line. This was not a man mourning his mother. This was a man annoyed by an inconvenience, eager to get the logistics over with, so he could get back to whatever financial disaster he was trying to hide. "So Dad," Derek said, breaking the silence without looking at me. "We will swing by your place, grab a suitcase, and then head to ours. I have already cleared out the guest room closet. You won't need much. Just the basics." I didn't answer immediately. My mind was still reeling from the funeral, from the ambush at the graveside. My silence seemed to irritate him. "Did you hear me?" he snapped, glancing over. "I heard you," I said softly. "I am just thinking about your mother." Monica let out a small, impatient sigh from the back seat. "Harrison dwelling on it won't bring her back. We need to be proactive. Depression is very common in men your age, and we don't want you spiraling. That is why staying with us is the only logical solution." Logical. That was the word they kept using to dress up their cruelty. It was logical to sell my home. It was logical to control my accounts. It was logical to bury my life before I was even dead. Suddenly, the phone in my breast pocket vibrated against my ribs. It was a long, sustained buzz demanding attention. Derek's head snapped toward me instantly. "Who is calling you?" he asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. I reached into my pocket, my movements deliberate and slow, playing the part of the weary old man they assumed I was. I pulled out the phone. The screen lit up with the name Preston Gould. Derek's eyes flicked to the screen and he frowned. He took a hand off the wheel and reached out, palm up. "Give me that. You don't need to be dealing with condolences right now. I will handle it." His hand was inches from my face. In that split second, the old instinct kicked in. The instinct that had helped me catch arsonists and embezzlement schemes for 3 decades. I didn't hand it over. Instead, I pressed the green button and brought the phone to my ear before he could grab it. "Hello," I said, my voice cracking slightly. Derek let out a groan of frustration and slammed his hand back onto the steering wheel. "Unbelievable," he muttered. On the other end of the line, the voice was crystal clear, cutting through the static of the rain and the tension in the car. "Harrison listened to me very carefully," Preston Gould said. His tone was not the warm baritone of an old friend. It was cold, precise, and terrified. "Do not react. Do not look at your son. Keep your eyes forward." I stared at the hood of the car, my heart beginning to hammer a frantic rhythm against my chest. "Who is this?" I asked, feigning confusion for Derek's benefit. "Good, keep playing the part," Preston continued, his words rapid fire. "I am looking at the toxicology report right now. The coroner missed it, or someone paid him to miss it. Catherine did not die of heart failure, Harrison. There were traces of digitalis in her system. Massive amounts. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The rain on the windshield blurred into gray streaks. Digitalis. It mimics a heart attack. It leaves almost no trace unless you are specifically looking for it." "Harrison, are you listening?" Preston urged. "You are in immediate danger. If they killed her for the shares, you are the only loose end left. Do not go to their house. Do not drink anything they give you. Do not eat anything they prepare. You need to get out of that car now." I felt a wave of nausea so violent I had to swallow bile. I was sitting next to the man who had been a baby in my arms, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, and now a voice in my ear was telling me he was an accessory to murder. "Who is it, Dad?" Derek demanded, glancing over again, his patience gone. I took a deep, shaky breath. I lowered the phone slightly, covering the microphone. "It is just a robocall," I lied, my voice trembling. "Something about an extended warranty." "Hang it up," Monica said from the back. "It is annoying." I put the phone back to my ear. Preston was still talking. "Come to my office at the port. The security team is waiting for you. Just get out of there, Harrison. Run." I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. My hands were actually shaking now, and I didn't have to pretend. I needed a plan. I needed to get out of this moving cage before we reached the highway. If we got on the interstate, I was trapped until we reached their house. And once I was in their house behind locked doors, I might never come out. I clutched my chest. I let out a sharp gasp, doubling over slightly. "What is it?" Derek asked, his tone more annoyed than concerned. "My pills," I wheezed, rubbing my sternum. "I left my nitroglycerin at the pharmacy near the church. I forgot to pick up the refill this morning." Derek rolled his eyes, looking at the digital clock on the dashboard. "Seriously, Dad, can't it wait? We have plenty of aspirin at home." "No," I gasped, adding a dramatic cough. "Chest is tight. Need them now." "Please, son." From the back seat, Monica leaned forward. "Derek, just stop. We don't need him having a medical emergency in your new car. The upholstery is cream-colored." Derek slammed his hand on the dashboard. "Fine. God, this day is never-ending." He swerved the car aggressively into the right lane. We were approaching a strip mall just a few blocks from the cemetery. There was a large chain pharmacy with bright fluorescent lights cutting through the gloom. It looked like a beacon of safety. "I will pull up to the curb," Derek muttered. "Run in, grab them, and come right back out. Do not start chatting with the pharmacist. I nodded weakly, leaning my head against the cool glass. Just park, I whispered. The car screeched to a halt in the fire lane. The rain was coming down harder now, a torrential sheet of gray. Derek didn't offer to get out. He didn't offer to help his grieving, supposedly sick father. He just unlocked the doors. Hurry up, he commanded. I opened the door and stepped out into the downpour. The cold water hit my face, shocking my system, washing away the fog of grief. I hunched over, clutching my chest, shuffling toward the automatic doors like a dying man. But the moment the sliding glass doors closed behind me, cutting off Derek's line of sight, I straightened up. The pain in my chest vanished. The frailty evaporated. I moved with the speed of a man half my age. I didn't go to the pharmacy counter. I walked straight through the aisles past the rows of greeting cards and vitamins, my eyes scanning for the exit sign. There it was, the rear emergency exit. I pushed through the heavy metal door, setting off a local alarm that buzzed angrily, but I didn't care. I was out in the alleyway behind the shops. It smelled of wet cardboard and garbage, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I ran. I sprinted toward the main road, waving my arms at the oncoming traffic. A yellow taxi, its vacant light glowing like a halo, slowed down. I wrenched the back door open and dove inside, water dripping from my coat onto the cracked vinyl seats. "Where to?" the driver asked, a heavy-set man with kind eyes looking at me in the rearview mirror. "Gould Tower," I said, breathless. "The cargo port entrance. And please drive fast." As the taxi pulled away, merging into the traffic, I turned around and looked through the rear window. Through the rain and the distance, I saw the SUV still parked at the curb. I saw the driver's side door fly open. Derek stepped out, looking toward the pharmacy entrance, his arms thrown up in a gesture of rage. He was slamming his fist against the roof of the car. He knew. In that moment, he knew the old man had slipped the leash. I turned back around, facing forward, my hands gripping my knees to stop them from trembling. I wasn't Harrison, the victim, anymore. I wasn't the confused widower. I was the man who was going to find out exactly how my wife died, and God help anyone who stood in my way. The taxi accelerated, leaving the cemetery and my son behind. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of my phone. It was my lifeline now. I closed my eyes and whispered a promise to the empty air. "I am coming, Katie. I am coming for them." The elevator ride to the 40th floor of the Gould Tower felt like an ascent into a different world. My cheap suit, damp from the rain and wrinkled from the run, felt out of place against the polished chrome and mirrored walls. My ears popped as the numbers above the door climbed higher and higher, taking me further away from the cemetery, further away from the life I thought I understood. When the doors finally slid open, I wasn't greeted by a bustling office, but by a silent, expansive suite that smelled of old money and lemon polish. Preston Gould was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city skyline that was gray and blurred by the storm. He didn't turn around when I entered. He just gestured toward the heavy oak chair in front of his desk. "Sit down, Harrison," he said, his voice gravelly and tired. I walked across the plush carpet, my footsteps silent. I didn't sit. I couldn't. Adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, making my hands twitch. Preston turned around. He looked older than the last time I had seen him at the company Christmas party 5 years ago. His face was lined with deep creases, and his eyes held a sorrow that matched my own. But there was something else there, too. Anger. He didn't offer me a drink. He didn't offer me condolences. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. He threw it onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed in the large room, sounding like a judge's gavel sealing a verdict. "Read it," Preston commanded. I reached out and opened the folder. The first page was a copy of a stock certificate. It was dated October 14th, 1980. The name on the certificate was Catherine Blackwood. The amount was significant. I don't understand, I said, flipping to the next page. These are shareholder documents. Catherine was your secretary, Preston. She managed your calendar. She filed your expense reports. Why is her name on these? Preston let out a dry, humorless laugh. He walked over to the sidebar and poured himself a glass of water, his hand shaking slightly. She filed my expense reports because she wanted to keep an eye on the operational costs, Harrison. She managed my calendar because she wanted to know who I was meeting with. Catherine wasn't working for a salary. She never was. I looked up at him, the papers trembling in my hand. What are you talking about? In 1980, when this company was on the brink of bankruptcy and every investor in town turned their back on me, your wife walked into my office. She took every cent of the inheritance she received from her grandmother, money she told you she had lost in a bad savings and loan collapse, and she bought 15% of Gould Logistics. I felt the room tilt. I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. I remembered that year. I remembered Catherine crying, telling me the money was gone. I remembered holding her, telling her it didn't matter, that we would build our lives on hard work instead of luck. We had struggled for years after that. We clipped coupons. We drove second-hand cars until the wheels fell off. I fixed the plumbing myself because we couldn't afford a professional. 15%, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Preston nodded. Gould Logistics is valued at $300 million today. Your wife Harrison was not a secretary. She was my silent partner. And that file you are holding is proof that Catherine Blackwood's estate is worth $45 million. $45 million. The number hung in the air, absurd and terrifying. My wife, the woman who darned my socks to save money, who worried about the price of eggs, was a multimillionaire. Why, I asked, the word coming out as a choked sob. Why didn't she tell me? Did she not trust me? Preston's expression softened. He walked around the desk and placed a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't about trust, Harrison. It was about protection. She knew you. You are a man of simple pride. You wanted to provide for your family. She didn't want to take that away from you. She wanted to save it for later, for retirement, for a time when you could both just enjoy the world. But more than that, she was protecting you from them. Them. I didn't have to ask who he meant. She saw it early. Preston continued, his voice hardening again. She saw the greed in Derek when he was just a teenager. She saw how he looked at expensive things with a hunger that was never satisfied. And when he brought Monica home, Catherine knew. She told me Monica had the eyes of a shark. Catherine knew that if they found out about the money, you wouldn't be a father to them anymore. You would just be an obstacle. A bank vault they needed to crack open. I looked down at the documents, at Catherine's elegant signature at the bottom of the page. She had carried this secret for decades, a heavy burden she bore, to keep our family pure, to keep our love honest. And I had been too blind to see it. They found out, didn't they? I said, the realization settling over me like a shroud. Preston nodded grimly. We had a data breach in the accounting department 2 weeks ago. A list of shareholders was leaked. Derek got his hands on it. He thought he was just looking for potential investors for his failing real estate schemes. And instead, he found his mother's name next to a $45 million fortune. The timeline clicked into place. 2 weeks ago. That was when Derek suddenly started visiting us every day. That was when Monica started bringing Catherine homemade soup. That was when they suddenly became the attentive children we had always prayed for. They didn't come to visit, I said, my voice turning cold. They came to audit. They realized that as long as Catherine was alive, she would never give them a dime, Preston said. She had made that clear to them 1,000 times, even without them knowing about the millions. They knew the only way to get to the money was through inheritance. And the only way to inherit was for her to die. I closed the folder. The paper felt hot against my skin. My grief was being replaced by something else. A burning, focused rage that I hadn't felt since my days investigating arson, looking at the charred remains of a building and knowing someone had lit the match. So it was the money, I said. They killed my wife for $45 million. Preston walked back to his desk and picked up a small black remote control. He pointed it at a large flat-screen monitor mounted on the wall. The screen flickered to life, showing a grainy black and white image. Money was the motive, Harrison Preston said, his thumb hovering over the play button. But money is just numbers on a page. What I am about to show you is not about finance. It is about evil. I hesitated to show you this, but you need to see it. You need to understand that the people you are dealing with are not human beings anymore. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for forgiveness for what he was about to do. This footage is from the security camera inside Catherine's private room at the hospital. I had it installed years ago for VIP clients, and I never told the hospital staff it was there. Derek and Monica didn't know it was there either. Preston pressed the button. The video began to play. I saw my wife lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors. She looked frail, sleeping. And then the door opened. Preston's voice was a whisper, but it sounded like a scream in the silent office. Watch closely, Harrison. And remember, once you see this, you can never go back. You can never be their father again. You have to become their executioner. The room went pitch black save for the glow of the monitor on the wall. I leaned forward in my chair, my hands gripping the armrests so tightly that my knuckles turned white. On the screen, the timestamp read 2 days before Catherine passed away. It was 3 in the morning. The hospital room was dim, bathed in the soft blue light of the medical equipment. My wife was asleep, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm that looked peaceful. I remembered that night. I had been sent home by the nurses, told to get some rest, because I had been awake for 30 hours straight. I had kissed her forehead and told her I would see her in the morning. I never imagined that leaving that room would be the biggest mistake of my life. The door on the screen pushed open slowly. It wasn't a nurse. It wasn't a doctor doing rounds. It was Monica. She was wearing a trench coat, wet from the rain, and she looked around the room with a sharpness that chilled me to the bone. She didn't approach the bed to hold Catherine's hand. She didn't check her temperature. She walked straight to the IV stand. I watched, holding my breath, as my daughter-in-law reached into her pocket and pulled out a small vial. Her movements were precise, practiced. She injected the contents of the vial into the IV bag. Then she reached down and adjusted the flow rate on the digital pump. She turned her head slightly, speaking to someone who must have been waiting just outside the door, or perhaps she was just muttering to herself. But the high-quality microphone Preston had installed picked up every syllable. She needs to go by Friday. Monica whispered, her voice sounding metallic through the speakers. If she drags this out through the weekend, the old-term life policy expires. We are not losing 500 grand just because she has a strong heart. The screen went black. I sat there, frozen. The silence in Preston's office was deafening. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just impatience. It was a calculated execution. They had put a deadline on my wife's life because of an insurance clause. $500,000. That was the price of Catherine's breath. That was the price of 40 years of love. Preston didn't say a word. He pressed a button on his intercom. Bring him in. The heavy double doors of the office swung open. 2 men in dark suits, clearly private security, walked in. Between them, looking pale and sweating profusely, was Dr. Evans. Dr. Evans. The man who had shaken my hand at the funeral. The man who had looked me in the eye and told me he did everything he could to save her. The man I had thanked for his compassion. He wasn't wearing his white coat now. He was wearing a wrinkled golf shirt and slacks, looking like a man who had been pulled out of a country club locker room against his will. When he saw me sitting there, the color drained from his face completely. Harrison Evans stammered, his voice trembling. I didn't know you were here. Mr. Gould just asked me to come by to discuss a donation to the hospital wing. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was sharpening by the second. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my gut, but it was being pushed aside by the cold, analytical mindset I had honed over decades of catching liars. I didn't see a doctor anymore. I saw a suspect. I saw a man with a gambling debt, or a mistress, or a secret that made him vulnerable. I walked toward him slowly. I didn't shout. I didn't lunge. I just took off my glasses and began to clean them with my handkerchief, a habit I used to use to make people nervous during interrogations. "You signed the death certificate, Evans," I said softly, not looking at him, just focusing on the lens of my glasses. "You listed the cause of death as acute myocardial infarction." "Heart failure." It was Evans said, sweat beading on his upper lip. "Her heart gave out, Harrison. You know she was weak." I put my glasses back on and looked him dead in the eye. I stepped into his personal space. I could smell the stale scotch on his breath. "Digitalis toxicity mimics heart failure," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "But you know that. You went to medical school. You also know that unless a forensic toxicologist is looking for it, it goes unnoticed." Evans laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound that cracked in the middle. "Digitalis. That is absurd. Catherine wasn't on Digitalis." "No, she wasn't," I agreed. "But Monica put it in her IV bag." "And you knew, or maybe you gave her the vial yourself." Evans took a step back, bumping into one of the security guards. "I don't know what you're talking about. This is crazy. I am leaving." He turned to the door, but the guard didn't move. Evans was trapped. Preston spoke up from his desk, his voice calm. "I have already sent a copy of the tape to the medical board doctor, but I haven't sent it to the district attorney yet. That depends entirely on what you say in the next 60 seconds. Evans looked from Preston to me. He looked like a trapped rat. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "Harrison, please," he whispered. "You have to understand. I have 3 kids in college. My practice is under audit. I needed the money." I felt a surge of rage so powerful I thought I might strike him, but I kept my hands at my sides. "How much?" I asked. Evans looked down at the floor. $50,000. $50,000, I repeated. "You sold my wife his life for $50,000. She gave it to me in cash." Evans blurted out, tears starting to form in his eyes. "Monica. She came to my office last week. She said Catherine was suffering. She said it was mercy. She said if I just looked the other way, if I just rushed the paperwork, she would take care of my IRS problem." "Mercy," I scoffed. "It wasn't mercy. It was an eviction notice." I turned away from him. I couldn't look at him anymore. He was pathetic. A weak man manipulated by a monster. "Get him out of my sight, Preston," I said. Preston nodded to the guards. "Keep him in the holding room downstairs. If he tries to make a call, break his phone." As the doors closed behind the sobbing doctor, the room fell silent again. Preston stood up and walked over to me. "We have the tape, Harrison. We have the doctor's confession. We have enough to put Derek and Monica away for life. I can call the police commissioner right now. He is a personal friend. They will be in handcuffs within the hour." I looked out the window at the storm raging over the city. I thought about Derek's fete at the funeral, annoyed about the Porsche. I thought about Monica scolding me for the cost of the casket. I thought about the text message I had seen on Derek's phone about the loan sharks. "Arresting them now is too easy," I said quietly. Preston looked at me confused. "Too easy?" "Harrison, they killed your wife. If they are arrested tonight," I said, turning to face him, "they will get lawyers. They will get bail. They will drag Catherine's name through the mud in court, claiming she was sick, claiming it was assisted suicide, claiming I am a senile old man, making things up. They will fight for the estate from a jail cell." I walked over to the desk and picked up the file Preston had given me, the file that proved my wife was a multimillionaire. I want them to feel what I felt, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I want them to think they have won. I want them to think they have stripped me of everything. I want them to stand in my house holding champagne thinking they are the kings of the world. And then when they are at their highest point, I want to kick the ladder out from under them. Preston studied my face for a long moment. Then a slow, grim smile spread across his lips. You want to set a trap? I am going home, Preston, I said, buttoning my coat. My son is waiting for me to sign a power of attorney. He thinks he is manipulating a confused old man. I think I should go give him exactly what he wants. Preston nodded. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a small high-tech earpiece and a pen that I instantly recognized as a recording device. Take these, he said. And Harrison, be careful. You are walking back into the lion's den. I took the devices and put them in my pocket. I am not afraid of lions, Preston. Not anymore. I am the hunter now. I turned and walked toward the elevator. The grief was still there, but it had changed shape. It was no longer a heavy weight dragging me down. It was fuel. I was going home to play the role of a lifetime. I was going to be the frail, broken, senile father they expected. And I was going to burn their world to the ground. The taxi dropped me off a block away from my son's house. I needed the walk. I needed the rain to wash away the last remnants of the man who had sat in Preston's office, the man who had commanded a room and interrogated a doctor. I had to shrink, I had to wither. I had to become the confused, grieving 72-year-old widower they expected to walk through that door. I hunched my shoulders, letting my posture collapse inward. I took off my glasses and rubbed them on my coat, leaving them slightly smeared to cloud my vision. I practiced a tremor in my right hand, the same one I had used to fool suspects into thinking I was nervous when I was actually closing in for the kill. By the time I reached Derek's driveway, I wasn't Harrison Blackwood, the investigator. I was just Dad, the burden. The house was a modern monstrosity of glass, steel, and sharp angles that looked out of place in the quiet suburbs. It had no warmth, no character. It was a house built to impress strangers, not to raise a family. I walked up the concrete path, my wet shoes squelching heavily. The front door was unlocked. I didn't ring the bell. I just pushed it open and stepped into the foyer. The air inside was dry and smelled of expensive chemical air freshener, masking the underlying scent of tension. I didn't announce my arrival. I just stood there dripping on the polished marble floor listening. I could hear sounds coming from the living room. The aggressive zip of a suitcase being opened. The rustle of fabric being tossed aside. The sound of drawers being pulled open and slammed shut. They were searching my things. I walked softly into the living room. The sight that greeted me made my stomach churn, though I kept my face slack and vacant. My battered leather suitcase, the one I had carried on business trips for 20 years, was lying open on their pristine white coffee table. My clothes were scattered across the floor like garbage. My shirts, my socks, the few framed photos of Catherine I had managed to grab before leaving my own home. Derek was on his knees rifling through the side pockets of the bag. Monica was standing by the bookshelf, flipping through my personal address book. They froze when they saw me. For a second, just a split second, I saw the raw guilt on their faces. It was the look of scavengers caught feeding on a carcass before the animal was truly dead. But then, as if a director had yelled action, the scene changed. Dad Derek exclaimed, jumping to his feet. His voice was too loud, too performative. "Where the hell have you been? We have been calling you for an hour." I stood there letting my wet coat drip onto their expensive rug. I blinked slowly, looking from my scattered clothes to my son's angry face. "I got lost," I mumbled, allowing my voice to waver. "The taxi driver. He took a wrong turn. I didn't recognize the streets. I got confused, Derek." I saw the tension leave Derek's shoulders. He bought it. He believed the act. He walked over and grabbed my arm, his grip firm and controlling. "You can't just wander off like that," he scolded, steering me further into the room. "You are not well. We were about to call the police. Do you have any idea how much stress you are causing us on top of everything else?" "I am sorry," I whispered, looking down at my feet. "I just wanted some air." Monica was already moving. She shoved my address book behind a vase and rushed over her face, arranging itself into a mask of exaggerated concern. She took my other arm, her touch light but possessive. "Oh, Harrison, you are freezing," she cooed. "You are soaking wet. Come sit down. Let's get this wet coat off you. You will catch pneumonia, and that is the last thing we need." They guided me to the sofa, peeling the coat off my back. I sat down heavily, letting out a long, weary sigh. I watched as Derek quickly began shoving my clothes back into the suitcase, trying to hide the evidence of their search. "We were just unpacking for you," Derek lied, not meeting my eyes, "making sure you had everything you needed. But it looks like you forgot your medication. We couldn't find your heart pills anywhere." "I left them at home," I lied back. "I am so forgetful lately." Monica tisked, shaking her head. "See, this is why you can't live alone anymore. You are a danger to yourself. But don't worry, I am going to take care of you. You sit right here. I'm going to go to the kitchen and make you something warm." She turned and walked toward the kitchen, her heels clicking on the tile. I watched her go. I knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't making tea because she cared about my body temperature. She was making tea because she needed to sedate me. She needed me compliant for whatever paperwork they planned to shove in front of me tonight. Derek paced the room, checking his phone every 30 seconds. He wouldn't look at me. He was too busy texting, likely updating the loan sharks that the asset had returned to the containment unit. I just closed my eyes and leaned my head back, feigning exhaustion. But under my eyelids, my eyes were moving, mapping the room. I saw the security cameras in the corners of the ceiling. I saw the stack of legal documents sitting on the sidebar waiting for a signature. I saw a large decorative potted plant in the corner, a snake plant with tall, sharp leaves. Monica returned a few minutes later. She was carrying a steaming ceramic mug. The smell of ginger and lemon was strong, but beneath it I could smell the faint metallic tang of something else, something chemical. "Here we go," she said, placing the mug in my hands. Her fingers lingered on mine for a moment, cold and dry. "It is a special blend. Ginger and honey. It will calm your nerves and help you sleep. You look like you need a good long sleep, Harrison." I looked down at the dark liquid. It swirled ominously. I remembered Preston's voice in my earpiece. "Do not eat anything. Do not drink anything." "Thank you, Monica," I said, raising the cup to my lips. I blew on it, the steam rising into my face. "You are too good to me." Derek stopped pacing and watched me. Monica stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the mug. They were waiting. The air in the room felt thick, charged with their anticipation. They needed me to drink this. It was the next step in their plan. I took a small sip, just letting the liquid touch my lips without letting any enter my mouth, and then pulled it away. "It is very hot," I said. "Let it cool for a minute, but drink it all," Monica urged, her smile tight. "It works best if you drink it while it is warm." "I need a blanket," I said, my teeth chattering. "I am still so cold. I will get the duvet from the guest room," Monica said. "Derek, watch him. Make sure he drinks that." She hurried up the stairs. Derek sighed and looked at me with open contempt. "Drink the tea, Dad. Stop being difficult." "I will," I said. "I just need to use the restroom first." The cold rain. Derek groaned. "Make it quick, and don't wander off again. The bathroom is down the hall, first door on the left." I stood up, clutching the mug with both hands. I shuffled slowly toward the hallway. As soon as I turned the corner out of Derek's line of sight, I moved fast. I didn't go to the bathroom. I stepped into the small alcove where the decorative snake plant stood in a heavy clay pot. I listened. I could hear Derek's footsteps walking toward the kitchen. I had 3 seconds. I poured the entire contents of the mug into the soil of the plant. The dark liquid disappeared instantly into the dry earth. I shook the last drops from the cup and wiped the rim with my thumb to make it look used. I waited a moment, flushed the toilet in the powder room for effect, and then shuffled back into the living room holding the empty mug. Monica was coming down the stairs with a duvet. She looked at my hands immediately. "Did you drink it?" she asked. I nodded, holding up the empty cup. Every drop. It was delicious. "I feel a little sleepy already." "Good," Monica said, exchanging a triumphant look with Derek. "That is the herbs kicking in. You rest now. We have some things to discuss later, but for now, just sleep." She tucked the blanket around me on the sofa. I let my head loll to the side, my eyes fluttering shut. I slowed my breathing, mimicking the deep, rhythmic breaths of a man falling into a drug-induced slumber. They watched me for a few minutes. I could feel their gaze. Then, convinced I was out, they walked into the kitchen. I heard the clink of a bottle. They were opening wine. They were celebrating. I opened one eye just a slit. I looked across the room at the corner alcove. The snake plant. The plant that is known for being nearly indestructible, able to survive droughts and neglect. It had only been an hour, but the reaction was terrifyingly fast. The tall, sword-like leaves were already turning a sickly yellow at the base. One of the leaves had collapsed, folding over itself like a broken limb. The tips were curling inward, brown and shriveled. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my body to remain limp. That wasn't just a sleeping pill. That wasn't just a sedative to make me sign papers. If that tea could do that to a hardy plant in 60 minutes, what would it have done to the heart of a 72-year-old man? They weren't trying to control me. They were trying to stop my heart. I lay there under the expensive duvet, listening to my son and his wife laugh in the kitchen, realizing that I was the only thing standing between them and a fortune, and they had just tried to kill me in their living room. I closed my eyes again, but this time I wasn't pretending to sleep. I was praying. I was praying that Preston and the police were ready, because the moment I opened my eyes again, the trap would have to be sprung. There were no second chances now. It was them or me. Dinner was a silent affair served on cold porcelain. The only sounds in the dining room were the scraping of silver forks against plates and the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. It was a clock I had given them as a housewarming gift 5 years ago, an antique I had restored with my own hands. Now its ticking felt like a countdown. I sat at the head of the table, a spot that usually commanded respect, but tonight it felt like the seat of the accused in a kangaroo court. Derek and Monica ate with a hunger that was almost aggressive. They cut their steaks with sharp, decisive movements, their eyes darting toward me every few seconds to ensure I was still playing the part of the confused, medicated old man. I pushed the food around my plate, my appetite long gone. Every time I looked at the medium-rare meat, I thought of the poison in the tea and the dying plant in the other room. I thought of Catherine lying in that hospital bed, trusting these people with her life. Then the moment arrived. Derek wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, set it down on the table, and reached under his chair. He pulled out a thick, stapled document. The paper made a heavy, ominous sound as it hit the polished wood of the table, sliding to a stop just inches from my water glass. I stared at it. I didn't need my reading glasses to know what it was, but I squinted anyway, furrowing my brow in a performance of bewilderment. The bold letters at the top screamed at me, "Durable power of attorney." Below that, in smaller print, were clauses that would strip me of my autonomy. It would give them the right to sell my property, access my bank accounts, liquidate my stocks, and make medical decisions on my behalf. It was not just a legal document. It was a surrender. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to sound pathetic. Derek leaned forward, clasping his hands together on the table. He put on that smile again, the one that didn't reach his eyes. It is just some paperwork to help us help you, Dad. We talked about this. After what happened today with you wandering off in the rain and forgetting your medication, it is clear that you are struggling. You are overwhelmed. Monica chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. We just want to take the burden off your shoulders, Harrison. You shouldn't have to worry about bills and taxes and property maintenance at your age. You should be resting. You should be grieving Mom. Let Derek handle the heavy lifting. That is what a good son does. I looked at Derek, a good son. I remembered when he was 10 years old and found a wallet in the park. He had wanted to keep the money, but I had marched him to the police station to turn it in. I had told him that character is what you do when no one is watching. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that lesson. Or maybe he never really learned it. I reached out and touched the paper. My finger traced the edge of the page. It says you can sell the house, I murmured, reading a line halfway down the page. That is just standard language, Derek said quickly, waving a hand dismissively. It is a boilerplate template the lawyers use. We have no intention of selling the house immediately, if you don't want to. But we need the option in case your health declines further and we need to pay for specialized care. Specialized care. That was code for a cheap nursing home while they spent my millions. I don't know, Derek, I said, pulling my hand back. I should probably have my lawyer look at this. Mr. Henderson has handled my affairs for 20 years. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Monica stopped chewing. Derek's jaw tightened. Mr. Henderson is retired, Dad. Derek lied smoothly. And besides, why do we need to bring outsiders into this? We are family. Do you not trust your own son? It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. If I said no, I would drop the mask. I had to keep playing the game. Of course I trust you, I said, lowering my eyes. I am so tired. Can we do this tomorrow? My head is spinning. Monica set her fork down with a sharp clang. We can't do it tomorrow, Harrison. The notary is coming first thing in the morning to stamp it, but we need your signature tonight so Derek can file it with the bank before noon. The accounts are frozen until we get this sorted. If we don't do this now, we can't pay for Mom's funeral expenses. Do you want her checks to bounce? Do you want to disrespect her memory like that? It was a low blow. Disgusting. Using Catherine's memory to blackmail me. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but I channeled it into my hands. I let them start to shake. Not a subtle tremor, but a violent rhythmic shaking that rattled the silverware on my plate. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I will sign. Derek let out a breath he had been holding. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy, expensive fountain pen. He uncapped it and held it out to me. Just right there, Dad. On the bottom line. Next to the X, I reached for the pen. My hand was shaking so badly that I missed it on the first try. Derek huffed and shoved it into my fingers. Grip it tight, he instructed, his impatience leaking through. I held the pen over the paper. The ink was black, permanent. I looked at the signature line. If I signed this, I was dead. Legally and likely physically within the week. I needed time. I needed to delay until the morning when Preston's team would be in position. I lowered the pen tip to the paper. But instead of writing, I let my hand spasm. It was a jerky, clumsy motion, the kind caused by misfiring neurons. The pen flew out of my fingers and skittered across the table. Oh, I cried out, sounding distressed. My hand. I can't control it. Derek groaned, rubbing his temples. Jesus, Dad. Pick it up and try again. Focus. I reached for the pen with my left hand, leaning my body over the table. As I did, I allowed my elbow to collide heavily with my full water glass. It wasn't a splash. It was a flood. The heavy crystal goblet tipped over, sending a wave of ice water cascading directly onto the document. The paper-cheap printer stock soaked it up instantly. The ink from the printed text began to bleed. The signature line turned into a soggy gray pulp. "Oh no," I gasped, pulling back and knocking my chair against the wall. "I am so sorry. I am so clumsy. Look what I did." Derek jumped up, grabbing the soaking wet document, water dripping from it onto his pants. "Damn it, Dad," he yelled, losing all pretense of kindness. "Look at this. It is ruined." This was the only copy I brought home. I shrank back into my chair, making myself small. "I am sorry," I repeated, putting my face in my hands. "I am useless. I just wanted some water." Monica stood up slowly. She didn't yell. That was what made her terrifying. She walked around the table until she was standing directly behind me. I could smell her perfume, cloying and heavy. She placed her hands on my shoulders. Her grip was like iron. Her fingernails dug into my trapezius muscles, painful and sharp. She leaned down, her lips brushing against my ear. "You are not useless, Harrison," she whispered, her voice low and venomous. "You are just difficult, and I am done being nice." She looked at Derek, who was trying to dab the document with a napkin. "Go to the study and print another one, Derek. I don't care if the printer is low on ink. Print it." Derek looked at her. "It will take 20 minutes to reboot that old computer and find the file." "Then we wait 20 minutes, Monica said, her eyes fixed on the side of my face. She squeezed my shoulders harder, sending a shoot of pain down my arm. "You are not going to bed, Harrison," she hissed, ensuring only I could hear the full malice in her tone. "You are not sleeping. You are not leaving this table. You will sit here and stare at that wet mess until Derek comes back. And then you are going to sign the new one. I don't care if we have to tape the pen to your hand. I don't care if we have to stay up all night. You are signing that paper tonight." She pulled back and looked me in the eye. Her face was a mask of cold, calculated cruelty. "If you don't sign, Harrison," she said, her voice flat, "then you really will need specialized care. Do you understand me?" I looked at her. I saw the darkness in her soul. I saw the woman who had poisoned my wife. And for the first time that night, I didn't have to pretend to be afraid. I nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "I understand," I whispered. "Good," Monica said. She sat back down and picked up her wineglass, taking a long, leisurely sip. "Now we wait." I sat there, the ticking of the clock sounding like a hammer in my brain. I had bought myself 20 minutes. 20 minutes to come up with a plan to escape a house that had become a prison guarded by a woman who would stop at nothing to see me dead. The living room was plunged into a semi-darkness that felt less like night and more like an interrogation chamber waiting for its next session. Derek had finally gone into his study to wrestle with the printer, leaving me exiled to the sofa. They hadn't offered me the guest bedroom. Monica had claimed the sheets weren't ready, but I knew the truth. They wanted me here in the center of the house where they could watch me, control me, and break me. The leather of the couch was cold and slippery against my cheek, and the throw blanket Monica had tossed over me smelled of that chemical lavender spray she used to mask the rot in this house. I lay still, my breathing shallow and rhythmic, pretending to drift off, but my right hand was tucked deep inside my jacket pocket, curled tightly around the recording pen Preston had given me. The house was silent for a long time, the kind of heavy silence that presses against your eardrums. Then it started. A loud crash echoed from the kitchen. It sounded like a stack of ceramic plates hitting the tile floor. The noise was violent and unmistakable. I sat up instantly, my heart hammering not from fear, but from the sudden acoustic assault. I looked toward the kitchen archway. The light was off. "What happened?" I called out, my voice raspy. "Is everything all right?" Monica walked out of the shadows of the hallway. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't checking for broken glass. She was holding a glass of wine, moving with a calm, predatory grace. She stopped at the edge of the living room and looked at me, her head tilted to the side like a curious bird. "What are you shouting about, Harrison?" she asked, her voice smooth and confused. "The crash," I said, pointing toward the kitchen. Something fell. It sounded like plates breaking. Monica frowned, taking a slow sip of her wine. She looked at the kitchen, then back at me, her expression shifting into one of pity. "There was no crash, Harrison. The kitchen is empty. Derek is in the study and I was upstairs. You must have been dreaming." I stared at her. I knew what I heard. The decibel level was enough to wake the neighbors. I wasn't asleep. "Monica," I said, keeping my tone steady despite the anger bubbling in my gut. "I heard it. It was loud." She sighed a long, weary sound and walked over to the coffee table. She set her wine glass down and knelt beside the sofa, bringing her face close to mine. "Harrison, this is exactly what we were worried about. The doctor mentioned that with your condition, auditory hallucinations are possible. You are under so much stress. Your mind is playing tricks on you." There was no noise. It is just quiet house sounds. She reached out and patted my hand. It was meant to be comforting, but it felt like a condescending pat on the head of a dog that had just soiled the carpet. "Just lie back down," she whispered. "Try to rest. We will have the papers ready soon." I laid back down, closing my eyes. I didn't argue. Arguing was what they wanted. If I argued, I would get agitated. If I got agitated, they could document an outburst. I recognized this tactic. I had seen it used by con artists who staged slip-and-fall accidents trying to confuse witnesses. It was gaslighting, pure and simple. They were trying to manufacture a medical history of dementia in real time. If they could convince me, or at least a judge, that I was hearing things that didn't exist, my testimony about the poisoned tea or the digitalis would be dismissed as the ramblings of a senile old man. I lay there analyzing their strategy. It was crude but effective against someone who wasn't trained to spot it. But I wasn't their patient. I was their investigator. And every lie they told was just another piece of evidence I was cataloging in my mind. 10 minutes passed. I heard soft footsteps on the carpet. I kept my eyes closed, breathing evenly. I felt a presence near the coffee table. I heard the faint slide of an object being moved. Then the footsteps retreated. I waited another minute before opening my eyes. I reached for my glasses, which I had placed on the side table next to the lamp. My hand grasped empty air. I sat up, squinting into the gloom. The table was empty. My glasses were gone. I felt a spike of genuine panic. Without them, the world was a blur of shapes and shadows. They knew I was virtually blind without them. Taking a man's sight is the quickest way to make him feel helpless. I patted the cushions. I checked the floor. Nothing. "Derek," I called out, unable to stop the frustration from leaking into my voice. "Derek, my glasses." Derek appeared from the hallway this time. He was holding a fresh stack of papers, the ink likely still wet. "What now, Dad?" he asked, sounding exhausted. "My glasses," I said, squinting at his blurry form. "I put them right here on the table. They are gone." Derek walked over, exaggerating his movements. He looked at the table, then he looked at me. "Dad." "You didn't put them on the table," he said, his voice dripping with false patience. "You left them in the car. Remember, you said they were hurting your nose." I gripped the edge of the sofa. "No. I wore them inside. I wore them at the dinner table. I took them off 5 minutes ago." Derek turned to Monica, who had drifted back into the room. "He thinks he had his glasses," Derek said to her, shaking his head. Monica made a tisking sound. "Oh, Harrison, you really are getting worse. You haven't had your glasses on since we left the cemetery. They are probably in the glove compartment." I looked from one to the other. Their blurry silhouettes stood over me like guards in a tower. They were rewriting reality, erasing my memory of the last hour. If I hadn't spent 30 years trusting my own observation skills above all else, I might have started to doubt myself. I might have wondered if the grief had truly broken my mind. But I knew where I had put them. And I knew that Monica had taken them while I feigned sleep. I see, I said quietly, forcing my shoulders to slump in defeat. I must be very confused. We know, Dad, Derek said, his voice softening into that sickening fake empathy. That is why you need us. That is why you need to sign this, so we can be your eyes. He dropped the papers onto the coffee table. The printer works now, he said. I need a signature. Then we can all go to bed. I need a moment, I said, rubbing my temples. I feel dizzy. Just give me 5 minutes to clear my head. Please. Derek looked at Monica. She checked her watch. 5 minutes, she said sharply. Then we are done playing games. They walked away, heading toward the sliding glass door that led to the patio. They thought, but I was broken. They thought I was sitting there mourning my lost mind. As soon as the glass door slid shut, I grabbed the pen from my pocket. I clicked the recording button on the top. I couldn't see them clearly, but I could see Derek pacing back and forth on the patio, holding his phone to his ear. I stood up and crept toward the glass, pressing myself against the heavy drapes, holding the pen as close to the seal of the door as I dared. The glass muffled the sound, but Derek was shouting, his voice rising in desperation. I told you it is happening tonight, Derek hissed into the phone. I have the papers right here. The old man is just being difficult. He is slippery. There was a pause. Derek was listening to someone on the other end. I saw him wince, his hand going to his forehead. No, listen to me, Sal, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Do not send anyone to the house. The neighbors have cameras. I will have the wire transfer authorized by noon tomorrow. I swear on my life. Another pause. Derek looked terrified. He held up his hand, looking at his pinky finger. Please, he whimpered. Not the finger. I am a pianist, Sal. Well, I used to be. Just give me 12 hours. He is signing it now. He is practically a vegetable. I have him exactly where I want him. He hung up the phone and leaned his forehead against the cold glass, taking huge, shuddering breaths. I stepped back into the shadows of the living room, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with triumph. I had the motive. I had the desperation. Derek wasn't just a greedy son. He was a man with a debt sentence hanging over his head. A man who owes a finger to a loan shark is a man who will kill his own mother for a payout. I sat back down on the sofa and clicked the pen off. I slipped it back into my pocket. My vision was blurry, but the picture was crystal clear. They weren't just gaslighting me to get control. They were racing against a clock I hadn't known existed. And now that I knew their deadline, I knew exactly how to make them sweat. The glass door slid open. Derek walked back in. He wiped the rain from his face and composed himself, putting the mask of the dutiful son back on. Okay, Dad, he said, clapping his hands together. 5 minutes is up. Let's get this done. I looked up at him, squinting through the darkness. I didn't look like a victim anymore, at least not inside. I looked like a man who was about to deliver the performance of his life. Where do I sign? I asked, my voice weak while my mind sharpened its blade. The house finally fell silent around 2 in the morning. The aggressive clinking of wine glasses and the murmur of conspiratorial whispers in the kitchen had ceased hours ago, replaced by the heavy rhythmic snoring of my son drifting down from the master bedroom upstairs. Derek had drunk enough Cabernet to sedate a horse celebrating a victory he hadn't yet won. He thought I was asleep on the sofa, a medicated, helpless old man dreaming of the good old days. He was wrong. I was wide awake, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, my mind sharp and clear. I threw off the heavy duvet Monica had tucked around me like a shroud. I sat up slowly, testing my joints. My back ached from the cheap cushions, but pain was a distant concern. I slipped my shoes on, tying the laces tight. I needed traction. If this went wrong, if I had to run, I couldn't be stumbling in my socks. I moved toward the hallway, stepping only on the edges of the floorboards, where the wood was nailed down, tightest, a trick I had learned investigating insurance fraud in old creaky warehouses 30 years ago. The house was dark, lit only by the faint blue glow of the streetlights, filtering through the rain-streaked windows. It felt less like a home and more like a crime scene waiting to happen. I reached the door of Derek's study. It was closed. I turned the handle, slowly applying upward pressure to keep the latch from clicking. It gave way silently, and I slipped inside. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke and desperation. It was furnished to look like the office of a tycoon, with mahogany bookshelves and a massive oak desk. But the shelves were filled with books that had never been opened, their spines uncracked. It was all set dressing, a stage for Derek to play the role of the successful businessman. I moved to the desk. I tried the center drawer. Locked. Of course, I didn't panic. I didn't look for a key. I scanned the desktop and found what I needed in a small crystal bowl, a silver paperclip. I picked it up, feeling the cold metal. It had been a long time, maybe 20 years, since I had needed to pick a lock without a warrant, but the muscle memory was still there. I straightened the wire, bending the tip into a small hook. I knelt down, bringing my face level with the lock. I inserted the wire, feeling for the tumblers. 1, 2. The third one was sticky. I applied a little torque, listening for the telltale click. There it was. A soft snap that sounded like a gunshot shot in the silence. I slid the drawer open. It glided on well-oiled tracks. Inside, there was no order. It was a chaos of crumpled papers and unopened envelopes. I pulled out the small flashlight Preston had given me, shielding the beam with my hand, so it only illuminated the inside of the drawer. I began to sift through the mess, my eyes scanning for dates and dollar amounts. What I found made my blood run cold. First were the mortgage statements. The house, this glass and steel monstrosity, was 4 months behind on payments. There was a foreclosure notice dated last week. They weren't just cash poor, they were drowning. They were living on borrowed time in a house they didn't really own. I dug deeper. Beneath the bank notices were handwritten contracts on yellow legal pads. I recognized the names at the top. Sal Russo. The outfit he ran out of the back of a pool hall in Jersey was legendary for its brutality. Derek hadn't just borrowed money. He had borrowed it from sharks who broke kneecaps as a warning and took lives as a penalty. The interest rates were astronomical. $200,000 in gambling debts. I shook my head in the dark. My son wasn't a businessman. He was a degenerate gambler who had bet his life and lost. But it was the folder at the very bottom of the stack that made me stop breathing. It was a pristine blue folder from a major life insurance company. I opened it, my hands trembling, not from age but from rage. It was a policy. A term life insurance policy. The insured was Harrison Blackwood. The beneficiary was Derek Blackwood. I looked at the date. It was effective as of 7 days ago. 7 days. They had taken this policy out a week before Catherine died. They had planned this. They knew Catherine was the first domino and I was the second. The coverage amount was $2 million. They had priced my life. To them, I wasn't a father or a grandfather. I was a $2 million lottery ticket that they had already purchased. I pulled out the spy pen Preston had given me and clicked the camera button, snapping high-resolution photos of every document. The foreclosure, the loan shark notes, the insurance policy with my forged signature at the bottom. This wasn't just evidence of fraud. This was evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. I was about to close the folder when I saw one last document clipped to the back. It was a brochure for a memory care facility, the cheapest one in the state. A place known for patient neglect and overcrowding. a place where people were sent to be forgotten. This was their plan B. If the poison didn't work fast enough, or if the police got suspicious, they would use the power of attorney to dump me in a hellhole, drug me into oblivion, and let me rot while they spent the insurance money. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't sadness. It was the final death of the love I had for my son. The boy I had raised was gone. The thing sleeping upstairs was a parasite. I carefully arranged the papers back exactly as I had found them. I couldn't leave a trace. They needed to think they were still in control until the trap snapped shut. I slid the drawer closed and locked it again, spinning the tumblers. I stood up, pocketing the paperclip. I had what I needed. I had the motive. I had the means. Now I just needed to survive the night. I turned to leave the room. I took a step toward the door, my confidence high. And then it happened. I stepped slightly to the left of where I had entered. My foot landed on a loose floorboard. Creak! The sound was low and groaning, echoing through the silent house like a scream. I froze, one foot in the air, my heart hammering against my ribs. I held my breath, listening. Silence. Then from the hallway upstairs came the sound of a door opening. Derek, it was Monica. Her voice wasn't sleepy. It was sharp, alert. I didn't move. I couldn't move. Is someone down there? She called out, her voice moving closer to the stairs. I heard the soft thud of her bare feet on the carpeted steps. She was coming down. If she found me in the study fully dressed with the smell of adrenaline on me, the game was over. They wouldn't wait for the poison. They would finish it tonight. I looked around the room frantically. The desk was too open. The closet was too far. The footsteps hit the tiled floor of the foyer. She was 10 feet away. I saw the heavy velvet drapes covering the sliding glass doors to the patio. It was my only chance. I threw myself behind the curtain, pressing my back against the cold glass of the window, pulling the heavy fabric around me just as the study door pushed open. I stood there in the pitch black, sandwiched between the glass and the dusty velvet. I held my breath until my lungs burned. The light in the room clicked on. I could feel her presence. I could smell that cloying lavender perfume wafting into the room. She was standing in the doorway, scanning the space. "Hello," she whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a taunt. I heard her walk into the room. Her footsteps were slow, deliberate. She stopped near the desk. I heard her hand brush against the leather chair. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that my shoes weren't sticking out from the bottom of the curtain. Praying that she wouldn't see the slight bulge in the fabric. I heard her sniff the air. She was smelling the room. Could she smell me? Could she smell the sweat of an old man terrified for his life? She took another step. She was close now. So close I could hear the fabric of her silk robe rustling. She was standing right in front of the drapes. I gripped the pen in my pocket like a knife. If she pulled the curtain back, I would have no choice. I would have to fight. And I didn't know if a 72-year-old man could win against a woman fueled by greed and malice. Her hand touched the curtain. I felt the tug on the fabric. My heart stopped beating. This was it. Meow. A low guttural sound came from outside on the patio. A stray cat jumped off the railing, brushing against the glass right behind my head. Monica gasped and pulled her hand back. "Stupid cat," she hissed. She stood there for one more agonizing second, then turned around. I heard the click of the light switch. Darkness returned. "Go to sleep, Monica," she muttered to herself. "You are hearing things just like the old man." She walked out, closing the door behind her. I listened to her footsteps fade up the stairs, followed by the click of the bedroom door. I slumped against the glass, sliding down to the floor, my legs finally giving out. I gasped for air, gulping it down like a drowning man. I had the evidence, but I also knew something else now. Monica wasn't just a partner in this. She was the watchdog, and getting out of this house tomorrow was going to be the hardest thing I had ever done. The sun rose over the suburbs with a blinding, cheerful intensity that felt like a personal insult. I had spent the remaining hours of the night curled on the floor of the living room, not daring to go back to the sofa in case they came down to check on me, and certainly not daring to close my eyes. My body ached in places I didn't know existed, and my mouth tasted like copper and fear. But as the first rays of light hit the expensive, soulless art on the walls, I knew I had to get up. I had to put the mask back on. Today was the day I would either reclaim my life or lose it entirely. I shuffled into the kitchen around 7 o'clock. The room smelled of stale wine and strong coffee. Derek was already there, leaning against the marble island, looking like a man on the edge of a nervous breakdown. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled, and he was staring at his phone as if hoping it wouldn't ring. Monica was sitting at the table wrapped in her silk robe, nursing a mug of black coffee. She looked up when I entered, her eyes narrowing instantly. "Good morning, Harrison," she said, her voice sharp. "I hope you slept well. We have a lot to do today." I didn't answer immediately. I walked over to the counter and poured myself a glass of water, making sure to spill a little on the floor, keeping up the charade of the frail, trembling old man. I turned to face them, letting my shoulders slump, letting my face hang slack with exhaustion. I didn't have to act much. The terror of the previous night had etched itself into my features. "I am tired, Monica," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I am so tired of fighting." Derek looked up from his phone, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. "What did you say?" he asked, stepping closer. I looked at him, then at the floor. I saw the ghost of the little boy who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. Now he was the monster. I said, "I am done," I repeated, letting a tear leak out of my eye. "You were right. Both of you. I am old. I am confused. I nearly signed the wrong line last night. I am hearing noises. I can't manage the estate. I can't manage anything." Monica stood up, her movement sudden and eager. She walked over to me, her face softening into that predatory smile I had come to loathe. "Does that mean you are ready to sign Harrison?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake honey. I nodded slowly. "Yes. I will sign the power of attorney. I will sign the house over. I will give you access to the accounts. I just want to rest. I just want to be taken care of." Derek let out a shout of triumph, slamming his hand on the counter. "Finally. Thank God. Okay, Dad. That is great. I have the papers right here. Let's do it now." He rushed to the study to grab the reprint he had made the night before. He came back holding the document and a pen, practically shoving them into my chest. "Sign it," he urged, his hands shaking with excitement. "Right now." I took the pen. I held it over the paper, but I didn't touch the tip to the page. I froze. "Derek," I said, looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes, "I can't sign this here. Not on the kitchen counter with coffee stains." Derek's face fell. "What?" "Dad just signed the paper." "No," I said, shaking my head stubbornly. "This is my life's work, son. This is everything your mother and I built. If I am going to hand it over, I want to do it with dignity. I want to do it properly." "What does that mean?" Monica snapped, her patience fraying. "I want a ceremony," I said, inventing the lie as I went. "I want you to call your lawyer. I want him here as a witness so there is no doubt later. And I want to do it tonight at dinner. I want to set a place at the table for your mother's photo. I want to sign the papers in front of her so she knows I am doing the right thing for our family." Derek looked at his watch, panic rising in his chest. "Tonight?" "Dad, no. We can't wait until tonight." I need to. I need to file the papers by noon. The bank closes early today. I knew he was lying. Banks didn't close at noon on a Wednesday. He had a deadline with Sal Russo. The loan shark wanted his money or Derek's finger. I lowered the pen. If we can't do it with dignity, I said, making my voice tremble with hurt, then I don't think I can do it at all. Maybe I should call my own lawyer after all. He always said important documents should be signed in a conference room. Derek looked at me, then at Monica. He was trapped. If he pushed me too hard now, I might snap back into stubbornness. If he waited, he risked the wrath of the loan shark. Monica stepped in, ever the strategist. Derek, call Mr. Henderson, she said, her eyes fixed on me. Or whoever that cheap lawyer is you use. Tell him to be here at 7 sharp. But the deadline, Derek hissed at her. Call your creditor, Monica whispered, though I heard every word. Tell him it is a done deal. Tell him you will have the wire confirmation first thing tomorrow morning. Send him a picture of the unsigned document if you have to. Buy us 12 hours. We are not losing this now because you are impatient. Derek ran a hand through his hair, cursing under his breath. He looked at me with pure hatred, but he forced a smile onto his face. Okay, Dad, he said, his voice tight. Okay, we will do it your way. A nice dinner. Tonight at 7. With Mom's picture. Thank you, son, I said, handing the pen back to him. That means a lot to me. The mood in the house shifted instantly. The tension didn't evaporate, but it changed flavor. It became manic. Derek spent the next hour on the phone in the patio, pleading with Sal, sweating through his shirt, until he finally got the extension he needed. Monica went into a frenzy of preparation. She ordered catering. She started pulling out the expensive china, the crystal glasses, the silver candlesticks. They were preparing for a coronation. They thought they had won. They thought the old man had finally broken. They were giddy with the anticipation of $45 million, not realizing that the number they were chasing was about to become the weight that crushed them. I spent the morning sitting in the living room watching them. I played the part of the vegetable. I stared at the wall. I mumbled to myself. I let them think I was fading away. But every time they turned their backs, I was checking the angles. I was checking the exits. Around noon, Monica told me to go take a nap, so I would be fresh for the big night. Go upstairs? Harrison, she said, not unkindly. You look like death. We want you to look nice for the lawyer. I nodded obediently and shuffled up the stairs. But I didn't go to the guest room. I went to the bathroom in the hallway. I locked the door and turned on the faucet full blast to mask any sound. I pulled the phone from my pocket. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard determination. I opened the messaging app and found Preston's number. I typed 3 sentences. The fish has taken the bait. 7 p.m. tonight. Bring the gift. I hit send and watched the little progress bar slide across the screen. Delivered. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at me was old. His skin was gray, his eyes were tired, and his white hair was a mess. But behind those glasses, the eyes were sharp. They were the eyes of a man who had spent 40 years hunting down liars and thieves. I washed my face with cold water, scrubbing away the sweat and the grime of the night before. I straightened my collar. Tonight, I whispered to my reflection. Tonight, we end this. I turned off the faucet and unlocked the door. I walked to the guest room and lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Downstairs, I could hear the pop of a champagne cork. They were starting the party early. Let them drink, I thought. Let them get drunk on their own greed. It would only make the fall that much harder. I closed my eyes and visualized the plan. The lawyer. The video. The police. It had to be perfect. One slip-up, one moment of hesitation, and they could still twist this. They could claim I was coerced. They could claim I was insane. I needed them to hang themselves with their own words. I lay there for hours listening to the house buzz with activity. I heard the caterers arrive. I heard the clink of silverware. I heard Derek laughing, a loud, boisterous sound that grated on my ears. It was the laugh of a man who thought he had gotten away with murder. At 6 o'clock, the door opened. Monica walked in. She was wearing a red dress, tight and revealing, inappropriate for a mourning period, but perfect for a celebration of wealth. She was holding a suit bag. "Get up, Harrison," she said, tossing the bag onto the bed. "Derek bought you a new suit. We burned your old one. It smelled like mildew. Put this on. The lawyer will be here in an hour." I sat up and looked at the suit. It was expensive, Italian silk. They were dressing up the victim for the sacrifice. "Thank you, Monica," I said. "Hurry up," she said, turning to leave. "And Harrison, don't forget to take your pills." We left a fresh dose on the nightstand. I looked at the small white cup on the bedside table. 2 blue pills. "I will take them right now," I promised. She smiled and closed the door. I picked up the pills and walked to the window. I opened the sash and tossed them into the rain-soaked garden below. I got dressed in the new suit. It fit perfectly. I looked like a millionaire. I looked like the man I was not the man they thought I was. I checked my pocket. The recording pen was there. The earpiece was in place. I walked to the door and put my hand on the knob. The clock in the hallway chimed 7 times. It was time. The living room had been transformed into a grotesque parody of a celebration. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne and the heavy, cloying scent of lilies that Monica had placed on the mantel, presumably to simulate a sense of mourning that neither she nor my son actually felt. I sat in the high-backed velvet armchair in the corner, my hands resting on my knees, clutching the silver-framed photograph of Catherine. It was a picture taken on our 40th anniversary. She was smiling that soft, knowing smile that used to tell me everything was going to be all right. I ran my thumb over the glass, tracing the line of her jaw, anchoring myself to her memory, because the reality in front of me was testing every ounce of my self-control. Across the room, sitting on the sofa with a briefcase open on his lap, was Mr. Finch. Derek had introduced him as a family friend, but I knew his type. He was an ambulance chaser, a man who wore a suit that was too shiny and a watch that was too big. He had the nervous energy of a rodent, his eyes darting around the room, assessing the value of the furniture, likely calculating his cut of the estate he was about to help steal. He kept clicking his pen, a rhythmic, irritating sound that seemed to synchronize with the pounding of my heart. Derek was standing by the wet bar, pouring a glass of scotch. He wasn't using the measuring jigger. He was pouring with a heavy hand, the amber liquid splashing against the crystal. He was already drunk. I could see it in the slight sway of his stance and the glassy sheen of his eyes. He wasn't drinking to numb the pain of losing his mother. He was drinking to celebrate the acquisition of her wealth. He raised the glass to the light, inspecting the color, then turned to face me. A cruel, lopsided grin spread across his face. "You look good in that suit, Dad," he said, his voice loud and slurring slightly. "Finally, look like you are worth something." I didn't answer. I just stared at him through my glasses, keeping my expression blank. Monica walked in from the kitchen, carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She placed them on the coffee table next to the legal documents. "Eat something, Mr. Finch," she said, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We have a long night ahead of us." Finch reached for a canapé, his fingers greasy. "So is the gentleman ready to sign?" he asked, looking at me with disdain. "I have a dinner reservation at 8. "He is ready," Derek said, walking over to me. He loomed over my chair, letting his shadow fall across my face. "Aren't you, Dad? You are ready to stop being a burden." I looked up at him. The man I had raised, the boy I had taught to fish, the teenager I had bailed out of trouble more times than I could count. There was nothing left of him in those eyes. Just greed. Just a bottomless black hunger. I am ready, I said softly. I just want to do what is right for the family. Derek laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. Right for the family, he mocked, taking a large swig of his drink. You know what would have been right for the family, Dad? If you had stopped clutching onto that money years ago. You and Mom sitting on millions while I was out here hustling, trying to make a name for myself. It is selfish. That is what it is. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could smell the alcohol and the rot on his breath. You know, honestly, he whispered, his voice dripping with venom. It is a shame you didn't go with her. It would have saved us all a lot of paperwork. You should have just died in your sleep, old man. It would have been cleaner. Then I wouldn't have to spend my evening babysitting a senile ghost. The room went deadly silent. Even Finch stopped chewing. Monica looked at Derek, a flicker of warning in her eyes, but she didn't stop him. She agreed with him. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, but it wasn't fear. It was the final severance of the bond. The last thread connecting me to him snapped. I wasn't looking at my son anymore. I was looking at a target. I looked down at the photo of Catherine. I apologized to her silently. I am sorry I couldn't save him, Katie. But I promise you I will stop him. I checked the grandfather clock in the hallway. The pendulum swung back and forth. Tick, tock. It was 1 minute to 7. I think we should wait until the hour strikes, I said, my voice steady. For luck. Derek rolled his eyes and straightened up, walking back to the table to refill his drink. You and your superstitions. Fine. 1 minute. Then you sign away the kingdom and you can go rot in whatever nursing home we dump you in. He laughed again, clinking his glass against Monica's. To the future, he toasted. To us. Monica clinked her glass against his. To us, she echoed. I sat there counting the seconds. 50, 40, 30. The atmosphere in the room was electric with their arrogance. They felt untouchable. They thought they were the predators in the room toying with a wounded mouse. They didn't know the mouse was wired. They didn't know the mouse had an army. 10 seconds. Derek looked at the clock. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The grandfather clock began to chime, a deep, resonant bong that filled the house. Bong. Derek smiled. Showtime, Dad. Pick up the pen. Bong. I didn't move. I kept my hands on the photograph. Bong. Derek's smile faltered. Dad. I said, pick up the pen. Bong. And then, cutting through the sound of the clock, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent sound. Ding dong. Derek frowned, looking toward the hallway. Who the hell is that? Monica looked nervous. Did you order more food? Derek relaxed, shrugging. Oh, right. I ordered a pizza for after. Celebration food. The fancy stuff is for the lawyer. He laughed at his own joke and set his drink down. Stay put, Finch. I will get it. It is just the delivery boy. He walked into the hallway, his footsteps heavy and confident. I heard him unlock the deadbolt. I heard him pull the heavy oak door open. Keep the change, buddy, just hand me the... Derek's voice died in his throat. Silence. I stood up slowly from the armchair. My knees didn't hurt. My back was straight. I buttoned my suit jacket. I placed the photograph of Catherine gently on the side table facing the room so she could watch what was about to happen. I walked toward the hallway. Monica was staring at me, confusion dawning on her face. Harrison, sit down. Where are you going? I ignored her. I walked until I could see the foyer. Derek was standing in the doorway, frozen. He wasn't holding a pizza box. His hands were hanging limp at his sides, and his face had drained of all color. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Standing on the porch, framed by the rain and the darkness, was Preston Gould. He was wearing a long trench coat, looking every bit the billionaire tycoon he was. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood 3 men in dark suits holding briefcases, and behind them 2 uniformed police officers. Preston stepped into the house, forcing Derek to stumble backward. He didn't look at my son. He looked straight at me, his eyes locking onto mine. "Delivery for Harrison Blackwood." Preston said, his voice cold as ice. Derek stammered, backing up until he hit the wall. "Mr. Gould, we weren't expecting. This is a private family matter." Preston ignored him. He walked past Derek into the living room. The legal team followed, filling the space, sucking the air out of the room. Mr. Finch, the ambulance chaser, jumped up from the sofa, clutching his briefcase to his chest, looking for a back exit that didn't exist. Monica stood up, her face pale. "Who are these people, Harrison? What is going on?" I walked past her, past the table with the unsigned documents, and stood next to Preston. I took off my glasses and cleaned them calmly with my handkerchief. I put them back on and looked at the 2 people who had tried to destroy me. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I told you," I said, my voice strong and clear, devoid of any tremor. "I wanted to do this with dignity, and I wanted witnesses." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the recording pen. I held it up so they could both see the small red light that had been blinking all evening. I turned to Preston. "Did you bring the gift?" I asked. Preston nodded and signaled to one of the lawyers. The man stepped forward and placed a laptop on the coffee table right on top of the power of attorney paperwork. "I think," I said, looking at Derek, who was trembling against the wall, "I think we should watch a movie before we sign anything." "Get the hell out of my house," Derek shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and bravado. He took a step toward Preston Gould, puffing out his chest in a pathetic attempt to assert dominance over a man who owned half the shipping lanes in the Atlantic. "This is private property. You have no right to barge in here with your goons and disrupt a family grieving process." Preston didn't even blink. He looked at my son with the kind of bored indifference a lion might show a buzzing fly. He didn't slow his stride. He simply walked right past Derek, his shoulder brushing against him with enough force to knock my son off balance. Preston came to stand directly beside me, turning to face the room, like a general surveying a battlefield. The 3 lawyers in dark suits fanned out behind us, placing their briefcases on the dining table, effectively occupying the space. The police officers remained by the door, silent sentinels, their presence a heavy unspoken threat. Harrison, Preston said, his voice calm and steady, "I believe we have some business to conclude." Derek scrambled to regain his footing, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. He looked at me, his eyes wild. "Dad, tell them to leave. Tell them you didn't invite them. This is insane. We are about to sign the papers." I looked at my son, really looked at him. For the first time in days, I didn't see the threat. I didn't see the monster who had poisoned my wife. I saw a small, desperate man who was drowning and didn't even know the water was already over his head. I slowly unbuttoned my suit jacket and reached for the glass of scotch Derek had poured for himself earlier. I took a sip. It was good scotch. Too good for him. "I am not telling anyone to leave Derek," I said. My voice was no longer the raspy whisper of a dying man. It was the deep, resonant baritone that had commanded respect in courtrooms for 30 years. The change in my demeanor hit them like a physical blow. Monica took a step back, her hand going to her throat. Mr. Finch, the slimy lawyer on the sofa, stopped shuffling his papers and went perfectly still. I walked over to the coffee table, where the power of attorney document lay waiting for my signature. The paper that would have enslaved me. The paper that would have been my death warrant. I picked it up. Derek took a step forward, his hand out. "Dad, what are you doing? Just put the pen to the paper and let's end this." I looked at him, and then I looked at the fireplace. The gas logs were burning brightly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "You are right, son," I said. "Let's end this." I didn't tear the paper. That would have been too messy. Instead, I walked to the hearth and tossed the entire document onto the flames. No, Derek screamed, lunging forward, but one of Preston's security guards stepped in his path, blocking him with a wall of muscle. We all watched as the paper curled and blackened. The edges caught fire, turning orange, then gray. The words "durable power of attorney" were consumed by the heat, vanishing into smoke. I turned back to face them. I stood tall, my spine straight, my shoulders squared. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't confused. "I will not sign that trash," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. "I will never sign anything you put in front of me ever again." Monica found her voice then. It was shrill, bordering on hysterical. "Harrison, have you lost your mind? Do you know what you just did? The bank, the accounts. We need that access to save the house, to save you, to save me." I repeated, letting out a dark, humorless chuckle. "You don't want to save me, Monica. You want to bury me, just like you buried Catherine." The color drained from her face at the mention of my wife's name, but she held her ground, her eyes darting to the police officers at the door. "I don't know what you are talking about," she hissed. "You are clearly having an episode. Derek, call the hospital. We need to have him committed tonight." Preston stepped forward, then raising a hand to silence her. "There will be no hospitals tonight, Mrs. Blackwood," Preston said. "But there will be a reading." He nodded to the lead attorney, a tall woman with silver hair and a face carved from granite. She stepped forward, opening a leather portfolio. She didn't look at Derek or Monica. She looked only at the document in her hands. "This is the last will and testament of Catherine Elizabeth Blackwood, dated 3 months ago," the attorney announced, her voice clear and professional. Derek laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "A will? Mom didn't have a will. She didn't have anything to leave. She had a jewelry box and some old clothes. This is a joke." The attorney ignored him and continued reading. "I, Catherine Blackwood, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will. Regarding my assets, including my 15% equity stake in Gould Logistics, my diversified stock portfolio, and my liquid cash reserves totaling approximately $45 million. The number hung in the air. 45 million. Derek's knees actually gave out. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish pulled from the water, gasping for air that wasn't there. 45 million, he whispered. Monica froze. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She just stared at the lawyer, her mind trying to process the magnitude of what she had just heard. The greed in her eyes flared up, bright and terrifying. That is impossible," she stammered. "She was a secretary. She was a nobody." "She was a silent partner," Preston said coldly. "And she was worth more than you will ever be in 1,000 lifetimes." The attorney cleared her throat and continued reading. "However, having observed the behavior, character, and lack of moral fiber in my son Derek Blackwood and his wife Monica, I have included a specific morality clause in this trust." Derek looked up from the floor, hope warring with terror on his face. "The clause states," the attorney read, "that if my husband Harrison Blackwood determines that our son has failed in his filial duties or has shown a lack of respect, love, and care for his parents, then the entirety of the estate, every single cent, shall bypass him completely." The room was so quiet you could hear the rain hitting the windows. In that event, the attorney concluded the $45 million will be immediately transferred to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and the National Widows Support Fund. The sole discretion for this decision lies with my husband, Harrison Blackwood. His word is final. His judgment is absolute. The attorney closed the folder with a sharp snap. I looked at Derek. He was staring at me with a look of pure horror. He wasn't mourning the loss of his mother. He was mourning the loss of the money he thought he had already spent. He was realizing that the loan sharks, the debts, the foreclosure, it was all crashing down on him, and the parachute he thought he had was actually an anvil. "Dad," he whimpered, holding his hands out. "Dad, please, you wouldn't. I am your son. We made mistakes. But 45 million, you can't give that away. We can start over. I will change, I swear." I looked at him with pity, not love, just pity. "You didn't make mistakes, Derek," I said softly. "You made choices. You chose to treat me like a burden. You chose to treat your mother like an obstacle. And you chose money over blood." I turned to the lawyer. "Execute the clause," I said. "Send the money to the charity. All of it." "No." The scream didn't come from Derek. It came from Monica. It was a primal, animalistic shriek. The mask of the sophisticated, caring daughter-in-law shattered completely, revealing the rabid creature underneath. She had spent years playing the long game, enduring a mother-in-law she hated, plotting poisoning, waiting for this payout. And in one sentence I had burned it all to ash. "She is lying," Monica screamed, her face twisting into a rictus of hate. "That bitch is lying. There is no clause. That money is ours. We earned it. We put up with you old useless parasites for years. It is ours." She looked around the room, her eyes wild, searching for a weapon, for a way to stop this reality from taking hold. Her gaze landed on me. "You," she spat, pointing a trembling finger. "You did this. You senile old bat. You stole it from us." She didn't think. She didn't look at the police. She just reacted. She launched herself across the room, her hands curled into claws, aiming straight for my face. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just watched her come, knowing that her attack was the final nail in her coffin. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to silence me. But she forgot that I wasn't alone anymore. As she flew toward me, screaming obscenities, the air in the room seemed to vibrate with the violence of her greed. But before her fingernails could graze my skin, the world slowed down, and I knew that the trap I had set had just caught its biggest prey. Monica never reached me. Before her manicured claws could graze my skin, one of Preston's security guards stepped forward with the speed of a striking cobra. He didn't strike her. He simply intercepted her, clamping a hand around her wrist and twisting it behind her back in a fluid, practiced motion. Monica let out a yelp of pain and surprise, stumbling backward, but the guard didn't let go. He held her there, panting and furious, a rabid animal caught in a snare. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just adjusted my cuffs and looked at Preston. "Turn it on," I said calmly. Preston lifted the remote control and pointed it at the massive 60-inch flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace, the same television Derek had bought with money he had stolen from the company accounts a year prior. The screen flickered to life, casting a cold blue glow over the dimly lit living room. The image was grainy black and white, but the clarity was devastating. It was the interior of a hospital room. The timestamp in the corner read 3:14 a.m. 2 days before Catherine died. Everyone in the room froze. Mr. Finch, Derek's slimy lawyer, stopped trying to stuff papers into his briefcase and stared at the screen, his mouth hanging slightly open. Derek, still slumped on the floor, looked up, his eyes widening as he recognized the room. He recognized the figure in the bed. It was his mother. And then the door on the screen opened. Monica walked in. In the living room, the real Monica stopped struggling. She went rigid in the guard's grip, her eyes fixed on the screen in a mixture of horror and disbelief. She watched herself approach the IV stand. She watched herself pull the vial from her pocket. The audio was crisp, amplified by the expensive surround sound speakers Derek was so proud of. We heard the rustle of her trench coat. We heard the click of the plastic vial. And then we heard her voice echoing through the room like a ghost. She needs to go by Friday. If she drags this out through the weekend, the old term life policy expires. We are not losing 500 grand just because she has a strong heart. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Derek slowly turned his head toward his wife. His face was a mask of confusion, as if his brain was refusing to process the data. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman he had conspired with, and for the first time he saw a stranger. You injected her, Derek whispered, his voice trembling. You told me it was just... You said you just turned off the alarm so she could go peacefully. You said it was mercy. Monica didn't answer. She couldn't take her eyes off the screen. Preston pressed a button, and the video skipped forward. The image changed. Now it was a close-up of Dr. Evans sitting in a chair, sweating, looking like a broken man. I took the money. The doctor's voice on the recording was shaky, pathetic. She gave me $50,000 in cash. She told me to list the cause of death as heart failure. She said if I didn't do it, she would report my malpractice to the board. I had no choice. She threatened my family. The video cut to black. I turned to face the room. Mr. Finch dropped his briefcase. It hit the floor with a loud thud, spilling papers everywhere. He looked from me to the police officers at the door, realizing he was currently standing in a crime scene representing a murderer. I didn't. Monica stammered, shaking her head frantically. That is fake. That is a deep fake. AI generated. You can do anything with computers now. They are framing me out. I stepped closer to Derek. He was still on the floor, tears streaming down his face. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading for me to tell him this was a nightmare. She did it for us, Dad. He sobbed, his mind trying to rationalize the horror. She went too far, I know. But she did it for the family. We were drowning. She was trying to save us. She loves me. I looked down at him. The pity I felt was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I needed to cut the last cord. I needed to destroy the illusion that had kept him bound to her. You think she loves you? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. You think you are partners in crime? Bonnie and Clyde against the world. I reached into my inside jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a legal document. It was a background check. A dossier I had compiled over the last 24 hours with the help of my old contacts in the bureau. I unfolded the paper and held it out so he could see the mugshots. 3 of them. Her name isn't Monica, I said. It was Brenda in Tallahassee. It was Claire in Jacksonville. And before that, it was Jessica in Tampa. Derek stared at the photos. They were younger versions of his wife, but the eyes were the same. Cold. Dead. Shark-like. I did some digging, son. I continued, my voice relentless. You aren't her first husband. You are her 4th. Derek shook his head. No. No, that is not true. She told me she was a widow. Her ex-husband died in a car crash. I nodded. Yes, he did. And so did the one before him. And the one before him fell off a ladder while painting the house. 3 husbands, Derek. 3 accidents. And do you know what they all had in common? I paused, letting the question hang in the air like a guillotine blade. They all died within 6 months of marriage, I said. And they all died less than a week after signing a large life insurance policy. I pointed to the desk in the study where I had found the policy on my own life the night before. She didn't marry you because she loved you, Derek. She married you because you were the perfect mark. Gullible, greedy, and desperate. She used you to get to me. She used you to get to Catherine. And once she had the money, once the $45 million was in her account, do you really think you were going to live happily ever after? I leaned down, getting right in his face. I found the policy in your desk, Derek. The one on my life. But I also found another one. A travel accident policy on you, dated for next month. For our family vacation to the Caribbean. Derek's eyes went wide. His breath hitched in his throat. You were the pig's son, I whispered. You were just the next pig she was fattening up for the slaughter. She wasn't going to share that money with you. She was going to push you off a balcony and play the grieving widow for the 4th time. No, Derek screamed a sound of pure anguish. He scrambled to his feet, turning toward Monica. The love in his eyes was gone, replaced by a terrified realization. He saw the Black Widow standing there, and he realized he had been sleeping next to his own executioner. Tell him he is lying, Derek screamed at hers. Tell him Monica didn't deny it. She stopped struggling. She stood up straight, smoothing her dress. The mask fell away completely. She looked at Derek with a sneer of absolute contempt. You were pathetic, she spat. You were so easy. A man-child playing businessman with daddy's money. It was almost boring how easy it was to manipulate you. Derek let out a howl and lunged at her, but the police officers were already moving. Before Derek could reach her, before the chaos could turn into more violence, the sound of sirens erupted from outside. It wasn't one car. It sounded like an entire precinct had descended on the quiet suburban street. Blue and red lights flashed through the front window, strobing across the walls, illuminating the horror on everyone's faces. The front door, which had been left slightly ajar by Preston's team, was kicked fully open. Police, get on the ground now. Uniformed officers swarmed into the hallway, their weapons drawn. The illusion of the wealthy, happy family shattered into a million pieces. I stood in the center of the storm, unmoving. I watched as they handcuffed Monica. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at me with eyes cold enough to freeze hell, calculating her next move, already planning her defense. I watched as they dragged Derek away. He was sobbing, calling out for me. Dad, help me. I didn't know Dad. I didn't answer him. I turned my back. I looked at the photograph of Catherine on the table. Justice Katie, I whispered. It is done. The chaos in the living room was a symphony of flashing blue lights and the metallic click of handcuffs. I watched as 2 officers hauled Monica toward the door. She wasn't going quietly. She was thrashing against them, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hate. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at Derek. You useless coward, she shrieked, her voice shredding the air. I told you to get the signature yesterday. I told you he was playing us. You ruined everything. You are a pathetic excuse for a man. Derek didn't hear her. He was on his knees in the center of the room, his expensive suit rumpled, his hands cuffed behind his back. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for a punishment that would never end. He looked up at me, his eyes swimming with tears and mucus. Dad, please, he blubbered. You can't let them take me. I am your son. I am the only family you have left. Talk to them. Tell them it was a mistake. We can fix this. I looked down at him. I searched my heart for a flicker of sympathy, for a spark of fatherly instinct. I looked for the toddler I had carried on my shoulders. I looked for the boy I had taught to shave. But they were gone. They had been killed by the man kneeling in front of me. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hate. I felt a profound, icy emptiness. I took a step closer to him. The room went quiet, waiting for my verdict. My son died a long time ago, Derek, I said. My voice steady and final. I don't know who you are, but you are certainly not family. I turned away before I could see the light go out of his eyes. I walked past the stunned lawyers. I walked past the police officers who nodded at me with grim respect. I walked out the front door of the house that was built on lies. I stepped onto the porch. The rain had stopped. The night air was cold and crisp, smelling of wet asphalt and pine. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. It tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the flashing lights. I walked down the driveway past the neighbors who had gathered on their lawns to watch the spectacle. I walked toward Preston's car where a driver was holding the door open. I got in, and for the first time since Catherine died, I didn't feel the crushing weight of grief. I felt the lightness of survival. 6 months have passed since that night. The seasons have changed, and so have I. The house was sold, the money donated to the orphanage, just as I promised. Derek and Monica are currently awaiting trial, and the evidence is so overwhelming that their lawyers are pleading for life sentences just to avoid the death penalty. But I don't think about them much anymore. They are ghosts of a past life. Today, the sun is shining. I am sitting on the deck of a 60-foot yacht that I named the Catherine. The ocean around me is a brilliant, endless blue. Preston is sitting across from me holding a glass of vintage red wine. We aren't talking about business. We are celebrating. To the foundation, Preston says, raising his glass. To the foundation, I reply, clinking my glass against his. We established the Catherine Blackwood Initiative last week. It is a legal defense fund and investigative agency dedicated to protecting the elderly from financial abuse and fraud. We have already saved 3 families from predators like Monica. I am not retired anymore. I have a new job. I have a new purpose. I take a sip of the wine and look out at the horizon. The wind ruffles my white hair. I feel strong. I feel alive. They looked at me and saw a victim. They saw gray hair and a slow walk and assumed I was weak. They thought they could strip me of my dignity and discard me like trash. They forgot the most important lesson of nature. I lean back in my chair and smile at the sun. They thought I was an old man whose time had passed. They forgot that before I was an old man, I was a wolf, and a wolf never forgets how to hunt. This story teaches us that family is not defined by whose blood runs in your veins, but by who is willing to bleed for you. My son and his wife saw me as a resource to be harvested, not a person to be loved. It is a painful lesson, but an important one. We must never let our guard down, and we must never underestimate our own strength. Dignity is not something that can be taken from you unless you surrender it. No matter how old you are, you have the power to write your own ending. If this story gave you chills or inspired you to stand up for yourself, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let me know in the comments if you would have forgiven Derek, or if you would have walked away just like I did. See you in the next story.